And we're live.
Wonderful. Well, hello everybody. Today we are discussing The Long Earth by Terry Pratchett and Stephen Baxter. I had to double check his name there. Okay, I guess it's going to be a short conversation today, I think. Well, since you're first on my screen, Mel.
Excellent. Excellent. I always enjoy going first. This was an interesting read for me in terms of, I don't know, I can't say I absolutely loved it, but I definitely would never say I hated it. I enjoyed it, but it took a while for me to get to enjoyment level. I think the starting parts where it was really jumping perspectives with no real connection between those perspectives was very jarring for me. And but other than that, like I did finish the book going, holy shit, cliffhanger, I need to start the next one.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I hate cliffhangers. I still haven't given it a star rating because I'm jumping between 3 and 4. It's one of those few times where I really would like a 3.5.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Because I do feel like I enjoyed it more than just my average 3 story because I was so excited to read the next one at the end. But I don't feel like I enjoyed it enough as I was reading it as a whole to go 4. But I'll probably end up on 4 just purely because the second half flew by, easy as. So.
Okay, Matt?
Nice. Oh, that means I'm next.
Yep.
Have we all got exactly the same edition, cover, everything?
I do believe so. Yes, yep. We all do.
Very good. Awesome.
Yours looks a bit smaller, Kim, but I don't think that there was a small version, so it must be just perspective. Like, put your hand over the top of it.
Oh, yeah, no, it's about the same size.
Yeah, same size.
B format. Yeah.
I just thought you had the little paperback version for a second.
Yeah,
there.
It looked like a little A format one maybe, but I really enjoyed this. And yeah, talk about like ending on a cliffhanger. I was just like, what? That's the end? Okay, I'll have to get the next one now.
Oh, if I get you for Christmas, I know what to get you.
I've got the next one.
Oh, have you?
Oh my, yeah, I've got the next one too.
The fact that I know that there's 5 in the series means that whatever I think is going on is either way deeper than what I'm thinking, or there's like much more to explain, even if it is. So yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I think I'll probably end up reading them all, especially if the next one is good too. I didn't find the first half slow personally. I liked that, like, oh, what's going on? When I get that sort of disjointedness of things, often that spurs me into like, hang on, I just realised half my face is missing. There we go. Into going, oh, I want to know more, and it sort of makes me read more, which, you know, not everyone does that, but that's how it works for me. And I don't, not to trot out the old Matt likes plot and world building better, but I was really like going, oh, I want to know what is the Long Earth? Why does it exist? How did it come into being? So all the questions that I'm hoping get answered as time and further books go on. It's interesting. I don't know if there's anyone. Didn't particularly like Joshua a lot as a character. I identified with some of the things that you know he thought about, but I don't think I particularly liked him. Maybe he'll warm up as the series goes on, assuming that it's the same characters in the following series. And maybe I'm talking a bit too much for just the intro part.
That's good.
But no, I did like it. I haven't rated it yet, but that's just because I haven't gotten around to it. But I would give this a 4 out of 5 on my Goodreads rating. I really enjoyed it. I'm definitely left hanging for the next one, and I will be reading the next one. But I think I've got every single Expanse book to read before I do that.
I have that same problem.
Yeah.
Well, not every single one, but a lot of them anyway.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, no, I need to read them all.
Yes, I think I completely agree with pretty much everything Mel said, and she basically said pretty much what I was going to say. I didn't love it, but I really liked it. I did find the first bit a bit slower than the second bit, but I enjoyed it all. I think the second bit just flew by a lot quicker than the first, in terms of just my interest and the flow of it. I did enjoy the first half as well, but the second half I think just carried on and flowed, and I didn't want to stop reading or listening. I did listen a bit on audiobook for this one, which is good for the accents because there's a lot of accents in there. So the audiobook is pretty good for the accents just alone. It does mean you know the accent before you start guessing it, and it starts being explained, which is a little bit difficult in when you're reading. So I knew the Australians were talking before it actually pointed out that they were Australians and things like that.
Yep.
It had a lot of interesting points about, social points and political points and things like that and what ifs. And it is a book I really enjoy because it makes me think a lot about a lot of different things. There's a lot in there. I know that the ones after this are like the Long Mars and Long War and the Long Mars, and so it sounds like what they were talking about in this book, going out into Mars, how it would be easy from the gap, going from the gap.
Yeah.
Later on in the book, so it sounds like that's something that they actually do. So it seems like there's a lot more to explore, even if it looks like they're going from Earth to other places and exploring them as well. So it seems like they've built a world that they can build a lot of stories on, kind of like the Silo trilogy. Really, they've built a world where they can build more stories onto it because it's such an expansive worlds. Just an infinite amount of space with an infinite amount of stories you could tell.
Yeah. And I originally thought that this was just going to be based on a couple of characters and then the next book would be based on other ones. But that cliffhanger leaves you feeling like, well, maybe that's not going to be the case.
Or at least they might sit with some characters and bring in some new ones, possibly.
Yeah.
It sounds like Joshua and Sally are still going to be in it. And Lobsang.
Because they got there's some very unresolved stuff going on there. So.
Yes.
Yeah. And it sounds like Lobsang. How did you guys say it?
Lobsang.
I say Lobsang.
Yeah.
Will be back as well, just not the same Lobsang.
Yes.
I wonder if well, I think there'll be two Lobsangs. At least the version that we meet again after it's been absorbed, and the version that's like the backup version that's then merged with all the other intermediate copies along the way.
Will the first Lobsang be Lobsang anymore?
That's a good question.
Because that's sort of what's implied by the whole concept of being absorbed by first identifier or whatever it was, first person identifier.
First person singular. Sorry.
First person singular. Yeah. Which, by the way, the concept itself is not a new concept per se, but the naming was just like, mwah. I felt a lot of Terry Pratchett in that naming. I do not know.
Yeah, there's some good humour in there.
Yeah, I do not know that was Terry Pratchett, but it just felt like his kind of witty, smart kind of thing that he would do.
I've never read any Terry Pratchett or Stephen Baxter before, so this is my first introduction to both authors, and I just assumed that the funny parts were Pratchett-y.
Well, from what I understand, Stephen Baxter is a lot more serious, like a very, very serious person. I read a review of somebody who had read both of them, and they were saying they felt like Stephen Baxter was a bit too strong in this story because it was lacking as much funny as they would like. And it felt very Stephen Baxter-y to them. But I was like, well, I think that's possibly not true. I think Terry Pratchett probably did have a strong influence. It's just that the story he wanted to tell wasn't his usual funny, witty,
just
kind of
difficult story. Yeah,
just because he's known for his like humorous stuff doesn't mean that's the only thing he can write or wants to write.
Exactly. And although I've always wanted to go back and reread, what's the one that Terry Pratchett did with Neil Gaiman?
Oh,
Good Omens.
Good Omens,
I always wanted to go back and reread Good Omens, because when I read Good Omens, I had never read either of them. So I didn't know which one was which at all. I just read a story and really thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yep.
I've now read both of them in their singular form, and I would love to go back and reread it, but I keep not doing it for some reason, even though I own the book.
Because you've got so much other things to read that you haven't read before.
Yeah, that might be the
Did
part
you
of
see
it.
my bookcase? Like one side of it, the one where you saw lots of Goodreads, Elder reads and things.
Yeah.
That's my read side. The other side is my haven't read or haven't read in so long. Because there's a group of books there that like I have read, but it hasn't been since I was like in my early to mid-teens, so I cannot remember them at all.
So you've put them on the
have to
to-read side.
reread.
Planning
to reread side, because I just cannot, like, I'm like, I know I enjoyed it.
Yeah. I have ones like that, though, that I read like years and years ago, and I'm sort of, sometimes I think I'd like to reread them, and other times I'm like, no, I think I prefer to just remember them as something I enjoyed, even if I can't remember the specifics. Because I'm worried that if I reread them, I won't like them.
Yeah.
This was terrible. What was I thinking?
Like it happens with movies. Sometimes you rewatch them and you're like, this is kind of uncomfortable. I rewatched You've Got Mail.
Oh yeah.
It was one of my favorite movies for years, and I used to rewatch it. Anyway, I hadn't watched it in ages, and I thought, oh, that's a great idea. Let's watch that. And I watched it, and I was like, oh my God, he's totally creepy. This is really awful. And I'm just like, stop thinking about it. Just enjoy it. It's okay. It's a different time. Your brain was different then. It's fine. No, I don't think I'll ever rewatch it again, quite possibly. Anyway, that became a rereads discussion. Sorry.
That's all right. I didn't really think about asking questions. I just read it.
I have notes.
Oh, good. Well, you bring up some of your notes, because then we can go from there.
So one of the things I felt like I was noticing throughout it, this is not really a question, it's more just me thinking things, was the fact that there were certain plot lines that didn't really seem to go anywhere. Now, I wrote this at a stage where some of the plot lines did go somewhere by the end, i.e. Helen, although it still sort of felt like, why did that have to be from the parents' perspective then? Why couldn't it be from Helen's perspective the whole way? But regardless. But there was still like that secretary who was working with the British government taking notes.
Yes.
They bumped into her later, but like it didn't mean anything or do anything.
Yeah.
I was just like, so is this a sign of Terry Pratchett? Because that's the kind of shit he does in his Discworld books, where he'll just have these random scenes with this random person.
Just
and it's for comedy though. And this wasn't comedic to me.
I mean, you get that thing at the beginning with the war guy. What's his name? Is on the back of the book. Private Percy. But that eventually does go somewhere. Yeah. I'm thinking. I just looked really quickly at what the next book is. It's like a generation later. So therefore, we could possibly see Helen again. We could see Rob, which it took me a while when she was talking about Rob to realize who he was.
Yes, it took me a minute too.
Yeah, Helen's brother. Yeah. Then
this is what happens when
so some of the younger ones, that'll be them. Where that may be them in the next book.
That still doesn't make sense for like the secretary, because she's an older lady.
Yeah, but it's only a generation later, so they may possibly still be in it, because they're only, they're not that old, because Jacob is apparently in the next one.
Yeah.
But he'd just be older.
Yeah.
It's sort of like when you start out. What's her name? The police officer.
Oh,
Jensen, Monica.
Jensen, yeah, Monica.
Yeah. Monica's 28 or 23 or something, or 28, whatever age she was. Then when it jumps forward, Jacob's actually the age that she was, so it actually sort of does a generation, or like half a generation.
Yeah. It does jump around a little bit like that in terms of time too, and sometimes I'd have to be sort of like, wait, how old are you now? How much time has gone past?
Yeah. So maybe that of some of these characters that have been introduced maybe in the next book, because it's not going to be so late that they're not going to be around anymore.
No,
It's going to be later that they may still be
but I
in the
just
story.
the reason I think I sort of think about it still now is that it's this kind of weird thing where I don't feel like this was a character book, even though we did follow Joshua pretty closely and stuff. But at the same time, those sorts of elements make it feel like a character book, and I'm wondering if it's just that it's not my kind of character book.
Yeah, it didn't have too much character development compared to world development. There was a lot of world development.
Yeah, it was very.
Yeah, it seemed
world
very
development, and that's
plot
what
driven.
maybe that's what the characters were brought in, were more to develop the world rather than develop actual characters.
I suppose that's actually a good way to put it, because that's kind of what, again, that secretary lady is like. She's this funny lady who's taking down the stories of people who get to the 100,000th world and that sort of stuff. Yeah. So that kind of makes sense.
This smattering across the board. The characters all seem to be doing their own sort of thing. It's a different thing, and sometimes they might meet up, but there's a lot of different things, and it sort of gives you an idea what all the different worlds are like and what the whole lot of worlds are experiencing in terms of the people coming to them.
Yeah.
And all the differences.
Okay. Next point. At what point, this is kind of a question, did you guys entertain the idea, if at all, that the long Earth was actually a circle that went back around?
Oh, right from the start.
Yeah, somewhere probably about a third of the way in when I actually started thinking about it.
So what did you think about the idea that was sort of suggested towards the end, that it was actually a sort of, I can't remember the name they used for it, but it's basically a spirally thing instead?
Yeah, so you sort of jump across, yeah.
Well, that's it. That's what my theory was. They didn't say that's what it was. They just described it as possibly actually being this sort of pattern, a coil or something. What do you call it? Slinky. Think like Slinky.
Slinky, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But that these soft spots that they're talking about, to me, the concept, if it was that shape, would be that those soft spots allow you to jump essentially through the coil links rather than through following through directly along the line. But they never really sort of said, well, yeah, whether that was the case or not.
And she did say that the soft spots sort of come and go, which is really confusing. So that'd mean maybe
their slinkies are going like this.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Maybe it's twisting and turning, so spots move. Yeah, it's hard. That one wasn't as well explored. Yeah.
So one of the things I felt while we were reading it, all the way through pretty much, but very muchly towards the end, was that Lobsang, I keep wanting to go low, but it's not. I know it's not. Lobsang was very muchly your Deus Ex Machina. He had all the answers all the time. And because he was a supercomputer, he could figure these things out when humans couldn't, because he had that much data available to him. And it wasn't so much that these things were implied that they couldn't be sorted out, like the language of the trolls and things, but that he could do it so fast that it made it possible for them to do what they were doing.
Yeah.
Yep.
So did you guys think that it was sort of a bit Deus Ex Machina, or were you just like, I don't care?
It was a little. I did find it a little, but yeah, I don't know. It's kind of like the Deus Ex Machina meets the other Deus Ex Machina. And they merge and go off at the end.
Yeah. Very long earth of you there, Kim. Yeah.
I found Lobsang intriguing enough as a character that I didn't care that he was kind of that thing in the book, that like performing that function.
Yeah.
I'm still not sure if he actually was ever a real person or not.
No, I'm still not sure either. And I must admit, I had such a bad feeling about him when he first came in that I actually warned Karina off reading the book, because I was like, her with AIs, I was like, Karina, you don't want to read this book. It's not for you. Where I was sure he was going to turn out to be bad somehow.
Still might.
I'm still not sure that he won't.
We'll get another Lobsang in the next one.
Yeah, and this will be
Yeah.
a different Lobsang in some respects because they've sort of had different experiences, which I think is going to be so confusing for Joshua. Like, what kind of relationship can you have under those circumstances when you sort of feel like you really know this person, but you absolutely don't?
It's like the new Lobsang will have the memories of the old Lobsang, but won't necessarily, like, it'll be lacking something, I suppose.
It's kind of like watching a movie of a memory of that you yourself had.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, we'll see how that one goes.
Kind of like when the Doctor regenerates. Still got all the memories, but the personality is different.
Yeah. And the relationships change a little bit and things like that. Okay. I'm just literally working through my notes here. I even put stickies in the book. I'm a good girl. Anyway, okay, I'll stick with the Lobsang stuff. So I'll just jump over one here. I was curious, did I miss something? But how did Lobsang know to call the elves elves? Like, how did everybody just know that the elves were elves?
I think it's a mix of mythology, that all these people knew the mythology and there was something about them knowing that mythology. Like, it might have just been a small group of people who knew that mythology and sort of said, oh, they're elves, and it sort of, caught on from there. And the trolls, there's certain things, it's sort of, I think they were trying to show that these trolls and elves have probably been on Earth before, and that's where the mythology came from. So they were sort of like trying to link it up to make you understand that these creatures were on Earth at some point or have visited, and that's where the mythology on Earth comes from.
I suppose I found that a little hard to buy, that so many disparate people came to the same conclusion.
I'm just wondering if it's that a small group of people came to that conclusion and just their thinking just sort of spread.
But that's the thing, like, that's what I'm wondering. As far as I could tell, Lobsang didn't know they were there or existed until they encountered them.
I think he's just extrapolated it.
Yes, extrapolated the data from the mythology, and just sort of join them up.
This all fits with what people talk about with elves.
Fair enough. Yeah. Anyway, it just sort of bothered me a little bit. I was just like, how did what? Anyway, but then that sort of fits in with the whole, what I was saying about him coming to conclusions in general and finding answers really simply sort of thing. It was just sort of like very pat.
He can process the data so fast that he just gets it straight away, whereas it might take humans a long time. So I'm figuring, like, I don't know that much about, the mythology of elves and trolls, but he has it all in his data banks.
Yeah.
And so I guess if you knew, it may be easy to join up, but I don't know those.
Yeah, that's the thing. And I think that's part of it, is that my brain is sort of trying to come to terms with these kinds of things when I don't have the brain for it. So anyway. Okay, last note I have before I go to my stickies is really just a comment. When Brian Crowley is doing his hate speech against the steppers, and particularly the natural steppers, I felt physically ill. I felt like I was literally sitting in a Trump rally, and it was just awful. I actually ended up not reading most of it. I was just sort of skimming to see when it ended and see what happened, because I was just like, oh, this is awful.
It does. That's what I was thinking about with, the political parts, where he's taken social and political things out of our current world and applied them to this book. That part was definitely the political part I was thinking about rallies, about the lies that people make up that are just, you base them enough on truth and people will believe the lies no matter how outlandish they are. That's the sort of thing that speech was for me. It was something that you do see modern day, especially with the Trump rallies and just anything where a group is trying to spread hate about another group. They use a bit of truth to perpetuate, to throw in with the lies so that people more readily believe them.
Yep. Okay.
But it's not just modern day though. A couple of weeks ago.
The past era,
It's like repeats anytime anyone has like. I was watching. What was it? It was this video from the 40s somewhere, and it was warning of fascism in America.
Yes.
Oh,
I
yeah.
saw that.
Did you see that?
Yeah, I saw it. It was an old movie sort of trying to teach people not to be racist and discriminatory and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. And it was the same kind of thing. The guy's saying, the guy's up on the thing doing his big speech about like saying the things that everyone agrees with to start with, and then start telling the lie and shifting the focus and putting the blame on, and everyone starts saying, oh yeah, it is their fault. And
yeah. So it's not new. It's just that at the moment it feels really prevalent, and that's why it's sort of affecting me that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I just found that an interesting reaction I had. I cannot say enough how ill I actually felt reading that.
It very much reminded me when I was reading that. I thought a lot about when we read Wicked and the Divine, the whole like Tara thing, where they just, it sort of goes off the rails sort of thing. Like one thing becomes another, and it just ends up being so hate-filled and full of lies. And it kind of made me feel like the way you feel about that, the political rally, was the way I felt about reading those Twitter things in Wicked and Divine. It sort of had the same feeling.
Yeah,
same
that was a
feeling
pretty
in your
awful
gut
reaction
about
too.
it. Yeah.
I just,
Yes, yeah.
Trying to find. I've got markers in, but I didn't like. They're not ones you could write on, so I have to figure out why I marked them.
Why you marked? Yeah.
It's one of those things that it seems perfectly obvious when you put it there.
Yep. Oh, yes, that thing.
That thing.
Oh, I thought this was fascinating. The fact that the Aboriginals all just went.
Yes.
Fuck this shit.
Yeah. All the Aboriginal. It said the Aboriginals are the most the largest amount, like largest percentage of them moved on.
The largest percentage of any ethnic group.
That's it.
One single ethnic group.
Yeah.
And they all just sort of went, and I'm sort of like, can we follow them? But I felt that a lot of the time. Like I felt like I didn't necessarily want to follow Joshua because he felt a little bit. He wasn't really, but he felt a little bit like he was the Luke Skywalker. He's going to save the world kind of feeling, even though you didn't know what was actually wrong and what he was going to do. But you sort of felt like you're following the mythological being important person of the world, rather than just following an ordinary person experiencing what's going on. And I was sort of like, could we follow Helen? Or could we follow, even the secretary lady, I would have followed her. Like, she ended up in the 100,000s, God damn it. How did she do that? Why? Sorry.
Not important. Moving on.
Not important, but yet I still felt it was important, and it would have been interesting. And we got like 3 pages of her, maybe. Anyway. Literally, I only have 1 marker for the first half of the book, and that was it. The first half of the book, there was just so much not knowing what's going on, and just lots of little stories that I was just like, I'm just reading to hope we get somewhere. It wasn't hard to read either. It was just, me. I think I marked this one because I was like, how are people getting through the ocean world? But they explained that later. Well,
yes, because, Sally had to get through it. It is Sally, isn't it?
Yeah, Sally says something about what happens to her. And
I keep wanting to say Lindsay because Lindsay's a girl's name as well, but that's her father's name.
Yeah. But I found it still a bit like questionable because I was like, but wouldn't the water be above land level and therefore you would step and you would be underwater, and then how would you step and you would...
No, sea level's usually below land level.
Yeah, but if the world is flooded, like if all the ice caps have melted enough for the world to be covered in water, I suppose, the water could have come somewhere else still, but it's still covering all the land masses and everything, which most of the time seem to be fairly stable.
I guess it depends, because...
But then we had one where
it was on something really, like a really high level of land. Maybe there is land somewhere, or that may have just been eroded right down by all the water, but I think she must have been up somewhere high in relation to sea level, quite high.
I'm actually
I think
hoping
She swam somewhere where it was low enough that she could, where she knew it would be low enough that she could step.
I'm actually hoping in the future ones that that the Lobsang's company will actually develop like his airships for people to travel on.
That's what they were doing. It does actually mention that they were making more for
the Mark Twain, or more than that.
More than that. Yeah,
Okay.
it does actually mention that. Very briefly he mentions it.
Okay.
Yeah, you could just make a system of like almost like barges.
Yeah.
Step onto them
Basically.
and then
Because it seemed like it was much safer to travel through the sky because you didn't have to worry about the Earth being level or
and you could be above the clouds, so above most of the weather as well.
Yeah.
so
Yes, but that he does mention that's what they're actually doing. That's what the company's doing. While they're making the Mark Trine, they're also making other airships.
Yeah, I said Twain, and then I was like, yeah, that's right. And then I was like, no, wait, that's the actual one. What? It's not that.
And if you actually, is it the cover of the second or the third one? There's actually an airship on it.
Okay,
I think.
So this
on the second one, there is on the cover is an airship.
There you go. See, I haven't actually
that's the
looked
long war
because I'm going this weekend. I was like, I can't start because I'm not taking a book. I'm just taking my Kindle, and I was like, you can't start a book. You cannot start a book before you leave because you will not be able to take it with you. So I'm sort of like I really wanted to pick up the next one straight away and I didn't. And so I can't even touch it or I will read it. The killer is that I'll probably not pick it up for ages now because I'll have lost that momentum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice, I'll just take it with you or buy the digital one. I'm like, I already own it. I'm not buying it again. I don't need to read it that much. Especially when it's probably $10 or something. Okay, so I marked this one especially for Kirsten, but she didn't read it, so I'm sad.
Aw.
But
she probably will, maybe.
It's probably worth telling her. Did anybody notice or remember the tree octopus?
Oh, I did hear that for a second. That something about a tree octopus, but I think I was listening to that and a sort of.
It doesn't say tree octopus. It just says it's like an octopus and it's moving through the trees, kind of spinning around.
Yes, yeah. I'm guessing that's probably very Terry Pratchett, that part. And then I was going to say the other very Terry Pratchett thing was the potato that powers the.
Yes, that is so Terry Pratchett. You probably totally came up with that idea. Anyway, so the whole thing, the reason for that is that I remember Kirsten telling me, I already knew about it, but I remember Kirsten telling me about this fake website that's out there for people not to believe just any old website, the tree octopus. And I was like, Kirsten. Anyway, you'll have to tell her that's in it. She might read it still.
I will. Keep your eye out for them.
Melanie wants you to know there's a tree octopus in there.
There actually is a tree octopus. It's just not on it. It's not on Earth datum.
Exactly right.
Some datum.
So Sally actually raises a very interesting point towards the end of the book, where she says that the whole setup of the fact that there's all these long Earths irritates her. Just as we've sort of trashed our Earth to the point where we're really struggling, suddenly this long Earth thing opens up and we've got all the answers. So what? And she says, what kind of God sets up a stunt like that?
It's interesting though. The only thing that's opened it up is that the stepping technology has sort of come into common usage. But, we know that people have been seeing the trolls for hundreds, if not thousands of years. It's entered Earth's mythology. So they've been stepping through from other parts of the long Earth to the datum Earth for a while. So I guess that means it's existed.
Yes.
Private Percy stepped over in 1917.
Accidentally,
don't actually
know how he did it,
But that's the thing, right?
Like have stepped. Yeah, there's
the natural versus now the ability for the other 3/5 who have the ability to step. as long as they've got the technology to do it.
Yeah.
Which I don't think the technology actually does anything.
Yes, that was the thing they were discussing
it's a psychological.
Yeah, Monica, that it's not actually.
But they still talk quite a lot about the fifths, the 1/5 that are natural, the 1/5 that can't.
So there's the fifth who just they don't have that ability, and the fifth that can just naturally step without a stepper.
Yeah.
And the others just need, like, it doesn't even have to be the stepping box. It could be anything. You could have drawn up a completely different plan.
So it needed to be complex enough so that people thought they were actually creating and building something.
Or something.
By hand, yeah.
Correct, like it just, when I do this, and it just helped to do that.
But the other thing they do discuss is that by creating it, by building it, it actually does something inside your brain.
That's why you have to finish it yourself, yeah.
Yeah, but it was implied that it's not just, if you think you can, you do. It's also sort of a case of it actually changes your perception or something by doing that building process.
Yeah.
By the winding creates this meditative feel or something along those lines.
I think it's kind of almost like of meditation, which is like all using mantras and stuff like that. I think it's and that's meant to, brainwaves in a sense of pushing to a different state of that. And I think this is just a similar kind of thing where doing the action changes your the type of brainwaves that's going on. Like, you have certain type of brainwaves when you're like normal consciousness, awake kind of stuff. You have some in one kind of sleep. You have a different kind of brainwave in another sleep. And people can, you can watch people do different things, and if they fall into a meditative state, they're still awake, but their brainwaves change to a state as they're asleep. It's just a similar thing. Instead of closing your eyes and repeating a mantra and altering your brain that way, it's the repetitive motion of doing the coiling, that kind of thing that changes your. It's just another kind of meditation without sort of like closing your eyes and trying not to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mel?
Yeah.
Don't go to sleep.
Sorry. I've been doing a lot of work this weekend, just getting ready to go, so a little bit. Yeah. Apologise. I think this is the speech. I just marked a little bit of it because I just wanted to say, how much does this sound like what's his face, for whose name we do not speak. All right, that's all my markers.
That's that the sudden.
Sorry, Matt, can you say that again? You broke up.
The Earth is running out of oxygen, and it's. I was just going to say, it's still an interesting point, though, that it is something that the majority of people now have access to, just as. So, even if it's not God or a God or some sort of higher consciousness at play, maybe there is humans at play who've known about this for a long time. Like, we still don't know a lot of the backstory about
Sally.
What's his name? The guy who built the box in the first place.
Yeah,
Sally's father.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like,
he wasn't a stepper apparently, but his wife's family was.
Yeah.
Yeah, but you don't really know much about him, how he even did it in the first place.
No.
But it's also implied that he's able to be taken, so or something.
Oh yeah, anyone can. I think that was like like at the end where they got the stepping people to grab non-steppers to take them over, as long as you're in that physical contact.
But what I mean is that obviously he could make the device work as opposed to the non-steppers at all. So that sort of implies that not everybody can do it without the device either. So they've got to have the device still, or whether that's just to convince his brain that he can do it, or whether that's because the device does do something. It seems to be still very mysterious to me.
I don't think the device does anything at all, to be honest. I think it's just it's like a mental MacGuffin for people to activate that ability. But whether or not that is a permanent thing that could happen, could someone who couldn't step without a stepping box over time become a natural stepper, like without not having to use it? Because I'm sure they talk about a couple of times. Yes, where he
in the fridge,
do
he
it,
breaks his
but
stepper,
then he did
and then
step.
he steps and he doesn't get the nausea when he steps.
Exactly right. Yeah, he stepped
accidentally.
naturally.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
So the question I suppose I have then is, the non-steppers, is it that they can't step, or is it that they're afraid to step and that gets in the way?
Well, the thing was, when Madison was, about to have a nuclear explosion, the ones that couldn't step and were taken got really, really ill.
Yes.
Like they had to, the medics were running to them and giving them a shot or something, and I'm like, yeah.
But see, to me, that sort of sounds like my fear of heights. It's not that I can't do it, but I feel really ill when I do it, and it doesn't make me feel very comfortable. And in the end, I just prefer not to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's more of an unanswered question.
Yeah.
My feeling is they are. I always come at it from a science point of view rather than a I don't want to use fantasy because we're not in fantasy land here. Oh, we kind of are, I guess. It's still science fiction.
It's all speculative fiction.
It is all speculative fiction. So I kind of approach it from let's say that this is a genetic thing, that there's a gene in there or a sequence of genes that gives this ability.
Yep.
And the people who can't don't have those genes at all, or they don't have them switched on, or they're in the wrong order, or something. Yeah. Or it could be that they have a natural aversion, like phobia level aversion to stepping, and they're mentally unable to do it, even if they may actually physically have the gene, assuming it's genetic, the genes to do so. I think that that's not necessarily an answered question.
Yeah,
it is one that, as we go through time, may actually get answered in the books, but it's too early on in the books for it to logically make sense that they figured it out. Especially
given that the next war seems that it's going to be between those who can and those who can't. So therefore, it's probably a big question in that book, in the next book.
See, that's interesting, because I assumed that the Long War was to do with first person singular and humanity.
Oh, well, I had a look on Goodreads, and the back sort of suggested...
Oh, they're talking about the steppers and non-steppers?
Yeah, okay. I don't know if they talk about that, but they seem to be talking about humanity battling each other.
Right.
So I don't know exactly for sure who it is battling each other, but the end of the first book seems to imply that that's who it would be.
Oh, yeah, and I just wondered if that was... I was wondering if that was almost like a red herring, and then it's that's not actually who's going to be at war, but...
That's a possibility as well.
Maybe it is.
So speaking of steppers, since we're in that sort of realm, what did you guys think about the whole happy landing zone and their theory about the fact that everybody who ends up there has to be or is reasonably not just healthy, but also mentally, well, I suppose it sits in the same category, but mentally healthy and able to deal with those situations and actually almost enjoy them, as opposed to people who might get frustrated by what's happened to them, as opposed to what they've chosen.
Yeah, where Sally was surmising that there may be a human hand in who was getting to happy landings.
Yes.
Yeah. Even if it wasn't a human hand, that's the one thing that makes me think there's conscious will involved in part of the Long Earth, and that for whatever reason, and maybe there are other things around the place as well, but that happy landings is sort of drawing people in, and that's something that's deliberate.
Yep.
Like it's not an accident that those type of people are turning up there, that there's some sort of hand involved. I'm not talking a god, but some sort of conscious thing to make this happen.
Alien?
Possibly.
Alien, or just something that's, well, as they explain about first person singular, something like that, something that's come from a different Earth, possibly.
And something possibly not encountered before, therefore we have no knowledge of it and understanding of what it could be doing.
Yeah. I think it'd be really interesting if they did like a DNA sequencing of, say, assuming that first person singular is a properly, fully organic organism thing and has DNA in the first place, the same way we do. How much we share, kind of thing. Like all life on Earth that we know about has like 98 to 99% the same genome, and it's only in the details that we really differ.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, I wonder how, on a completely, like, millions of Earths down the track, whether there's enough similarity there, or if it is really different, kind of thing. That'd be interesting too.
I just had a really interesting idea about happy landings. What about if the one controlling it all is actually the trolls?
Could be. They seem to make the world, the thing different. We were talking about the balance, like there could only be so many humans in a certain area.
Like, and they seem to enjoy living with the humans.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad point. And I don't know if it was Sally, or I think it was Sally, but I'm not sure, who said they were concerned about what happens when the human migration gets there just through normal progression.
Yeah.
And like, what does that mean?
What's going to happen?
And like, maybe it could, whether it's intentional or not, or if it's maybe just like a byproduct of the trolls being there. But
well, I was thinking, maybe it's even a case of the trolls are actually more aware of humanity themselves, and perhaps this is their way of making sure humanity comes to understand them, so that they don't do something nasty to the trolls in their travels. So like this is sort of, they've cherry picked these people to get to know them and to understand them, and their boundaries and all of that sort of stuff. And so by doing that, when they get more contact with humans, these humans can then spread the word. But I might be attributing too much intelligence to the trolls.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. You might be.
Yeah, it's not really. They don't give you a super clear idea of just how intelligent they are.
Well, that's the thing. Like, just because they don't live what we would call a civilized lifestyle doesn't necessarily mean they're not intelligent. And we know they've had exposure to humans, so they may understand and know that packs of humans are potentially dangerous to them. I don't know. It was just an idea. I like the first part of it at the very least, that perhaps that was their idea. For what purpose, I don't know,
though. I almost kind of felt that it was almost like a natural side effect kind of thing.
Then it's people ending up there.
Yeah, like that having the trolls there and, the only thing that bothers me about that is it's kind of based around psychology, and I'm not sure how that translates to pulling people kind of thing.
I agree. The whole thing requires it, really. Like, if there's a hand controlling it, as Sally suspects, it still requires someone to know about your personal psychology before they pull you.
Yeah.
So short of an omniscient God-like person, who else would have that?
I was just thinking there is one flaw in Sally's argument that there's no one blind there. If you were blind, would you want to go to an unknown world where you don't have things like braille or guide dogs or things like that? Would you really want to leave the original Earth if you had some sort of disability? If you were in a wheelchair, do you want to really go somewhere where there's dirt everywhere? Some people might, but I think most wouldn't.
I'd be curious to know about more lower level disabilities and their prevalence there. Like, blindness seems extreme. What about autism? What about just sight impaired, hearing impaired.
Mm.
Like, hearing impaired wouldn't stop you. It might hinder you a little bit, but it wouldn't stop you, and you wouldn't necessarily be miserable. Especially if you weren't completely deaf, you're just hearing impaired.
Yeah.
Those sort of lower level things, I'm like, well, are they there? Like, you seem to be discounting any disability.
Yeah.
And haven't people
It's
had
kind of like there's like disabilities things like that, where they're saying there's no people with, people with lost fingers and things like that. They were there, but people who have, maybe it's something about genetic disability or genetic issues.
Yep. Then we get into the difficulties of whether some things that we don't know if, like, autism is not really diagnosed as a genetic thing, I don't think.
Well, that's a hard one.
What did I see the other? Hang on, I've got to look something up. Sorry.
You're right.
Me while I...
Matt is Googling.
I saw something about autism recently, and I didn't read it at the time, and I should have, and now I'm trying to remember.
I could be wrong, by the way. My autism knowledge is not broad, so it could be that I'm assuming it's not genetic.
This is the thing. I was having. I know we're getting a bit off. Well, we're sort of semi on topic. I remember a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, Anyway, time frame isn't important. There was a bit of an interesting conversation going in my office, a heated conversation between two of the staff members in my team about mental illness, and one of them was on the side of I just think it's really bad that anyone ever prescribes medication at all for a psychological issue, and the other person was on the side of that's a really terrible idea, and you're putting people at harm by not considering the use of medication to treat people's mental health kind of thing. And it was getting a bit heated, like
strong opinions were happening.
Strong opinions were happening. But when I thought about it, I thought ultimately it's, unless you believe in a soul or something non-corporeal in people, ultimately any mental health issue is always going to be physiological, one way or another. Because your brain, it's a physical thing. It's neurons, it's connections, it's chemicals. And, yes,
we don't understand necessarily enough about the brain to...
Exactly. We're still in relative infancy about understanding neurochemistry and neurological structures, and we know some things work, but they don't always work for everyone, or sometimes it might have a really bad effect on some people. And hence why they say, we'll try this one and see how it goes. If that doesn't work for you, have a bad effect, let's try something else. And it's that progressive thing of finding something that works for you.
Yes.
And I'm just like, actually, unless you are saying that, there's something more to consciousness than just what's going on in your brain, then it's always going to be something that could be treatable with the right drug, the right chemical. We just don't know enough to get there yet.
Yeah. But that's the thing, a lot of people do believe that your brain is not that sort of physiological side that you're talking about, because that most of them who believe in those sorts of things, I believe, are religious. And so for them, it's not about science so much. It's just about getting a hold of your brain and things. But I think it's all about this balance, right? Yes, we shouldn't rely too much on chemicals to the point where we can't deal without it. But at the same time, some people literally have chemicals going on in their brain which make it difficult for them to get on with their life.
That's me. I take SSRIs because I don't have psychological depression. I have, as far as the doctors know, a lack of serotonin. So that's the only reason I get depression is, not that other factors can exacerbate it, but taking SSRIs mean I'm just a normal person because I've got the normal amount of serotonin.
The right amount of serotonin,
And if I don't take them, I am handicapped compared to everybody else.
I think the reason people are afraid of the whole idea of people taking medication for psychological problems is because they think of people with like ADHD, where they're basically being drugged out of their brain so that they can't do anything. They think of this sort of worst case awful situation with something that's fairly common. And so they sort of assume that drugs are a bad thing for people to be taking. And it's like, well, no, I think it's a case of balance. Just like if I have an injury, I don't, I want to see a physiotherapist so that I can get the manual help that I need to help improve it. But I also might need some anti-inflammatories to make sure that it goes in the right direction. And that can be a lifelong thing, and that can be a short-term thing. But whatever it is, it needs to just be in balance.
Yeah.
Yes, I have actually, I watched a documentary on ADHD, and they were actually talking about that, where it has to be a balance. You have to get the medication right and you have to get the treatment right. It won't work for one person, it will work for the other. You have to really monitor the dosage of the medication. Some people it may just not work for at all. Others, it'll just allow them to be normal. And you'll hear some people with ADHD say, oh, no, couldn't take the medication, and others who have ADHD said, oh, thank God for the medication. If it wasn't for the medication, I, never would have learned anything at school, or, I would have so many problems. It's all, it's all a lot of guesswork as well.
It's all just, it's more than just going to see your doctor and your doctor getting it right. It's having people around you who give you the feedback on how you're doing outside of your own brain and things like that. So it's not just based on your own experiences. It's about how others see you doing and stuff like that. Anyway, that did go way off topic eventually.
Yeah, sorry. That's
all right. It was still relevant because in the end, that's sort of the kind of questions we're sort of asking about happy landings. But I also think it's an important thing for the whole story as a whole, because I do feel like they did not address people with disabilities in general when it came
to... They brought it up, but they didn't, somebody brought that little bit up, but it didn't really
go anywhere in terms of like what's actually going on in the world out there right now. Are people with disabilities heading out into the world? Do they have ways to solve their problems? I felt like it was sort of a J.K. Rowling situation where they were just like, we don't want to deal with it, so we'll just sort of ignore it.
Hogwarts does not come with handrails or ramps. That's right. You just float yourself up. It's fine.
Yeah.
She's also even come back and told people now that, these people have magic. They cure disabilities. And it's like...
well, that's easy.
Yeah. That's a bit not how things work. Because
that's super convenient, though. Like, just send all the muggles over, fix them up, and then wipe their memory, and good as new.
Yeah.
Away you go.
Well, I've thought that about a few things. Like this is going way off topic. We're going well into Hogwarts now, but like this is sort of the thing that, like, when you think about Hogwarts, when they talk about St. Mungo's and they're talking about how awful Muggle medicine is, I'm like, oh, why aren't you guys do anything about that? Like, seriously, you can't do something? Your statute of secrecy is such that you can't help fellow human beings in your same country on
There's
some sort of level.
Morality questions that get brought up if you think about it a little too much, hey?
Yeah, unfortunately, though, that's the thing. That's the problem, though, sometimes with doing these discussions, right? Like, if I just read a book, I don't get to that level of thinking about things too much. But doing this makes me think.
Whoops. So basically, everyone in the wizarding world is fucking like terrible.
Or they just up talking their medical abilities. They're actually not that great. It doesn't seem like they're that great when they're at Hogwarts. Their medical abilities, it's like they can reset a bone, but
yeah, I agree. It's all very convenient for the plot, whatever's going on.
Yeah.
But so Kim, tell me if you thought of this, but was it very obvious that this story was written by men when it comes to the females going off into the world?
Yes, yeah. I didn't think about that too much, but as soon as you mentioned that, I'm like, yep.
Men wrote this book. Got nothing against Terry Pratchett. I've read some of his books with main female characters, and I think he does a perfectly fine job. But oh my god. Excuse me.
Uh-oh.
It's the wine and the tides and the still slightly getting over things. Wine, I need more. You're coming for a walk.
Okay.
Let's go.
Don't look too closely. You may experience seasickness as we. All right, well, I've got nothing else. I've given you all my notes, people.
Oh, was there anything else that I thought about?
Oh, you're drinking some Rockford, I see.
It's Rockford.
I might have bought a little bit of Rockford, and it has now become my favourite wine. I even bought some of my, I thought I'll stock myself up on both my favourite wines because the strawberry Moscato one's the other one I love. I thought I'll buy a case of that, and I've got a case of this, and I'll just alternate between them. I'll have next wine for probably the next year.
I remember you saying that, that you're alternating.
Yeah. I had, last time I was drinking the strawberry Moscato, and I don't like it as much as I like the Rockford, even close.
You've been spoiled now.
Oh,
You came to SA, you went to the Barossa, you've been spoiled.
I've been spoiled. It's really actually quite terrible because what's really nice about this one is that it's not a dessert wine, but it has that nice level of sweetness for me. Mm-hmm. And now I find the strawberry Moscato way too sweet. And I'm like, oh God, I've got a whole case of it. I have to drink it.
Try and sell it. Give it away as gifts.
I was thinking I might keep it for Christmas because my sister likes it and my mum doesn't mind it. And if I don't take the Rockford with me, which no one else is allowed to drink.
Well, that's okay if you leave it at home, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. If I don't take it with me and I take a whole heap of strawberry Moscato, I'll keep everybody else busy with getting rid of the stuff I don't want anymore.
Yes.
I feel like you've started down the long and winding road to more diverse wine varieties.
Mm-hmm. But Matt, the thing is all I want to drink is this.
That's right. And at some point you will try another wine somewhere and you go, you know what, this is actually not bad either. I like this too. And you realise it's a little bit further down the track than that one.
The killer is that this one seems to be a grape that only Rockford have.
Oh yeah, they do have those ones, don't they?
Yeah. And I was like, where am I going to get this other than Rockford? I think I'm going to always have to order it from Rockford. Right, put in my yearly order.
I think they said there was maybe a half a dozen wineries that or no, the half a dozen vineyards that maybe grew that grape.
Maybe.
In that area, and that there was only a few wineries who are actually making.
That's okay. I'll just keep ordering the Rockford. I mean, I know
the
them
Rockford
now.
one.
Yeah. I know them now. I know how to order it. It's my Uncle Evan's. It was my Uncle Evan's favourite winery, so it's got that
exactly
for me. I'm like, I'm good. I'm fine. My dad's impressed. He's probably going to want to have a bottle when he's here. Darn it, he's going to steal my Rockford.
Damn it.
I suppose they did travel quite a long distance to come and take care of my pugs for me. I might just have to let them whatever they want from my wine collection.
Reasonable exchange.
Yeah, because it's not I even offered to pay to cover their travel expenses, and they're like, "No, it's all good." And I'm like, "This is
I just ran into Tombo because he was too busy looking at my coffee machine. I'm making myself a hot chocolate.
Oh, nice. Oh, now I want a hot chocolate, but I've got wine. Oh well.
I promise.
I need something with sugar. My throat is just getting sorer and sorer. And I've got another cold. Another cold.
No. You're not allowed to do that.
We finally seem to have gotten out of the sickness
Get out of the way
thing. Yeah. Now, no one in the house seems to be actually.
Well, that's good.
Has anything?
Not passing it around.
Took a while though.
Yeah, I'm really worried because
Nye
keeps saying he feels like he's coming down with something, but never actually really does. And I'm really worried that as soon as we get to Japan, he's just going to go sick.
Mm.
Yeah.
And Japan's one of the worst countries to be sick in, not because of their healthcare. That's fine. If you're really, truly, truly sick, you're fine. They'll cover you. But for just general colds and stuff, they don't have anything that really kills, not kills it because you can't kill it, but you know, masks the symptoms like with our stuff does. And so you basically end up with like limb style stuff, and it's like, oh god.
It's a bit of paracetamol and that's it.
That's pretty much all it is. And yeah, so that doesn't
do you have some pseudoephedrine? I just need some pseudoephedrine.
Yeah, let's try translating that to Japanese. I've been doing we're getting way off topic. Stop it, Melanie, stop it, pull it in, rein it in. Do we have anything else for the book?
I was trying to think of anything, but
so I will ask a question then. Go, Matt. No,
my only thing was, I'm still trying to work out exactly how, what technology, Lobsang's using to power all his computery things and artificial intelligence and whatnot, when he can't have any ferrous materials, and that's kind of what we use a lot to transfer electrical current.
Copper was fine.
I know copper was fine, but it's super inefficient compared to other things.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I don't know, and it's like also a lot heavier. And
I just assumed he'd come up with some sort of solution a la his gel brain type thing.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, maybe being a Voyager fan means that I sort of accept the whole gel electronics kind of thing, because Voyager was filled with it. So
even then, they were just like accelerators for the regular computer core.
But that like I said, it's not an explanation so much as just a level of acceptance.
No. that was just my IT guy thing going, how the hell is he doing this?
That's okay. I had my female moment, right? So all right. So I was going to suggest, guys, if we are interested and we want to do like a buddy read and do the second book later on.
That'd be good.
Doesn't necessarily mean we have to read it at the same time, but just like with the expectation at some point we'll have a chat about it.
I enjoyed it enough that at the end of the book, that cliffhanger means one way or another, I have to read the next book. I'm not going to be satisfied unless I do so.
Well, I have to because I own it.
Oh, there you go.
I don't have to, but I own it, so it makes it a lot easier.
Yeah, ditto, Kim. I'm the same. Like I may have questioned it if I didn't already own it, but I own it, so the chances are much higher.
Yep. But you know what's really annoying? I've got because I bought it at the book grocer for $6. It's a trade paperback. So I've got the little paperback and the trade paperback. That's why I got when I got the Wool series, I got Wool and Shift in trade paperback, so I had to get Dust in trade paperback, so I had to go on Booko and just like search the ISBN number, find the trade paperback ISBN number and order it by ISBN number, because I'm like, I can't have one in.
Yeah.
It's awful. I hate mismatches. Because like I wanted to buy me the whole set because all 5 books were out when he bought them for me at the beginning of this year. But he knows how bad I am about that sort of stuff. And at that time, the last one, which I think is the Long Cosmos, was only available in the
would have been out in trade for a start.
Yeah, trade. And so he was like, I knew not to get you that one. Thank you, my love. You know me so well.
It's like, I love the trade paperbacks, but you can't always find them when you want them. You have to like be on time sometimes, or find a copy that hasn't sold somewhere.
When I got the Wool series, I bought them in trade as well, the whole thing. And I was really in love with trade size at that time. And I have found that my love of that size has diminished considerably. And I am not a fan of them being that big now.
I love it if I'm not taking them anywhere.
Yeah, that's not too bad. But I do take my books places with me because I only usually read one book at a time. I mean, I might have other books that I'm reading, but I just am not actively reading them. So, yeah. Anyway. That's one of the reasons why I'm worried about the new Anne Leckie book coming out, because I'm like, I think it's going to be a trade. And I'm like, no, you must match my ancillary series.
What would that be, the 3rd or 4th one? Or
No, it's a standalone in the same world.
Oh, right. Okay.
So, yeah, very excited to read it because it's the same world, but it's not in the same part of that world or anything. It's completely separate. She's just used the world building, which I'm like, I'm cool with that sort of stuff. You do that. You do that. And the fact that it's a standalone, I'm Anyway, are we finished talking about Long Earth? Because I will end the hangout.
I think so.
Yep.
Okay. All right. Thanks for joining us, guys. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.